Good afternoon. We are here with Mr. Smith, and this is part of the Northern Virginia Civil Rights Archive that's been initiated by Congressman Gerald Connolly. It is to commemorate the 50th anniversary of the signing of the Civil Rights Act, which today is the 50th anniversary of the signing of that act. And Mr. Smith, you have so kindly agreed to give us testimony about your rich family heritage in Fairfax County to help future scholars and historians understand what it was like for African Americans in Fairfax during the struggles of segregation, Jim Crow, inequality. So we're really appreciative of you doing this. On behalf of the Congressman, I want to thank you on behalf of the Library of Congress, also the libraries of Prince William and Fairfax County, and George Mason University Folklore Program, which is underneath of the Northern Virginia Folklife Archive. Your videotape will be housed at the Library of Congress and at George Mason University. So you ready to get started?
I'm ready.
All right. So Mr. Smith, why don't you give us your full name and date of birth and where you were born?
William Wesley Smith, born in Washington, D.C., Freedmen's Hospital, 1940, August 8, 340, and grew up in Merrifield, Virginia, and went to school in Fairfax County, Merrifield. I started school in the two-room school. And then from there on, I went 1 year at James Lee, and then from there on went to Luther Jackson High School, which is in Merrifield, Virginia.
Well, when you went to the two-room schoolhouse in Merrifield, what was that like?
Well, it was kind of exciting to me because going to school was quite interesting, and you had different kids from around the community, and you got a chance to meet children of the families in the area.
So what were the conditions of the school?
Just a two-room school. They didn't have bathrooms, and you didn't have a stove. Well, you had a potbelly stove in each room, and you had outdoor toilets, you know.
Did the children have to take care of the maintenance of the school?
I think the maintenance crew come down at times, but Mrs. Dolly Bland was doing the one cleaning the school, I think at nighttime, maybe once or twice a week. She lived there next to the school.
Who were your teachers?
My first year was a lady named Mrs. Bailey, and I guess in one room, and then Mrs. Coleman, Agnes Coleman, was in the other room. She was the principal of the school. After they left, I was there a year when we got new teachers. The new teacher was Mrs. Leola T. Ball, B-A-U-G-H, from Petersburg, Virginia. Her husband was studying to be a doctor, and he was at Howard University. And then the principal and teacher was Ms. Mary Mann Brown. And she was, like I said, the principal of the school, and she taught the second room.
Okay.
Then when she left, then a few years later, then two more teachers came. One was Mrs. Dolores Corbin from Arlington, Virginia, and the principal was Mr. Cecil M. Robinson from, I guess you could say, Alexandria, Virginia. Yeah.
And so what grade was it that you went to the Merrifield School?
What now?
What grade?
I went there the first grade, but I only went a half a year the first grade. I think it was, I don't know why, but I did, went just a half a year. Then the next year, I went there all day long, you know.
And then you went to James Lee?
Went to James Lee after the sixth grade because Mrs. Emma O. Moore, I think her name was this black supervisor, and she decided, I think, that the school was a little bit too crowded just for two rooms, you know. And I went to James Lee just 1 year.
And what was it like? Because actually we're videotaping here at James Lee Community Center,
right,
which had been James Lee Elementary,
right,
the colored elementary school.
Right, yeah.
What was it like coming here to James Lee?
It was different for me because I wasn't used to all kinds of wide, rowdy children, and I made the best of it, you know. Only went 1 year, though.
Was it different? I mean, were the facilities were much better than?
Were better here. You had indoor bathrooms, you had a cafeteria, you had an auditorium, And I guess they had a lounge. The teachers had a lounge.
Oh.
And they may have had a clinic, may have. I don't quite remember that, though.
Who were the teachers that were here? Do you remember?
Okay. All right, starting. Okay, I'm going to name, I think I can name them all. Start with it. Okay, let's see. That was Mrs. Lola Saunders. She lived right here beside James Lee. Then there was a lady named Mrs. Saunders. That was a Mrs. Costner. That was a Mrs. Marjorie Robinson. Mrs. Louise Williams. Mrs. Julia Brockman. Mr. Williams, Taylor M. Williams was the president. Then that was a Mrs. Lomax. Then that was a Mrs. Trail. Mrs. Trail ended up going up to Luther Jackson in the elementary side. And let's see, there was another lady there. There was a Ruth Robinson down in the basement in a classroom. She died in the early age in the 60s. And let's see, Mrs. Jean Wheeler Felton. Her husband just passed away a month ago, George Felton.
Huh.
And they were educators. And seems to be I'm missing someone else.
Did you mention Ms. Henderson?
I didn't know a Henderson in school.
Okay.
No, I did
Okay.
not know.
Okay.
I think I've named them, just about named them all. It's pretty good to remember back that far.
That's
Those
excellent
teachers,
memory.
you know,
Yeah.
And Miss Hilda Lucy was the president. No, Miss Hilda Lucy was the secretary to Mr. Taylor M. Williams.
Okay.
Yeah, she's passed away since too.
So was it a good feeling here? Did you feel like the teachers were promoting and pushing you to be the best that you could be?
Yes, they were. Yeah, I think about that nowadays. Compared to what I hear about the schools today and what we went to for what we had, I think they did an excellent job, you know, really.
Did you have used books and?
Yeah, we used, yes, most likely we had used books.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, when you were in the Merrifield School, I think the white school was in Dunlorne Elementary?
It was.
And it was brick?
Yeah.
So did you have to walk to school or did you take a bus?
Well, we walked to, because our house was right near the school, you know.
Okay.
We had a path coming through the woods and walked right to Gallows Road and then crossed the road and we were at the school.
So you also went to Luther Jackson?
Right.
What years did you go to Luther?
1954. It opened in 1954 and it probably closed in 1964 maybe.
As a high school?
As a high school.
Okay.
And it was a high school in elementary because the elementary department replaced the old two-room school we had.
So what was it like going to Luther Jackson High School?
Right.
What was it like?
It was nice. It was exciting for all kids, and it was, you know, we had all the conveniences, you know, that you could get at that time. You know, we had a cafeteria, bathrooms inside. You had a library. They had a clinic, like if you got sick, and you had quite a staff there. You had well, there was the principal, the teachers, and there were the counselors, and you had gym classes. You also had, let's see, what else was that they had there?
So you actually had a gymnasium there?
Right, gymnasium, yes they did.
So before then you didn't have that?
Oh, no, we did not, no.
Yeah.
No.
So what was the community like? We're going to get to your grandparents and the heritage, but when you were growing up, it was segregated. What was that community of Merrifield like?
Well, let's say how people used to put it down like this. You stayed in your own boundaries, you know. You didn't go out a whole lot of socializing. Like the guy named Anderson who lived next to the land where the school is, he was originally from South Carolina. I don't think he cared for blacks too well, so he would talk to the outside, you know. And they wanted to build a community there, but he said he wasn't going to sell no his land for no black folks, you know. Yeah. So anyway, and then let's see what else was there. Actually, the land for the two-room school came probably from Henry Bland and family, because you know back in the day, a school could not be built unless black people owned the land. So I think Mr. Bland sold that land for the school, and their house was down there in the bottom. Yeah.
And where's the bottom exactly?
Okay, right behind where the McDonald's is today.
And that's where the two-room schoolhouse was?
Right down there. If you look straight back at the McDonald's, it was a little bit to the left, down the hill.
Okay.
There's still a tract of land there now, but I think it's been sold. And evidently, when they went through that rebuilding around Merrifield, for some reason it was like a track still there. I bet you I'm the only one around knew that it was there, because I always looked down there and said, I'll be darned, that driveway is still there.
Of the school?
Of the school, yeah, right. But it might be gone now, because my cousin was telling me Harrison Tanner, in the Merrifield, Mr. Harrison Tanner was a truant officer. And if you didn't go to school, he'd come and see why you weren't going to school. But up until just this year, not long ago, they were still paying some taxes on a little strip of land there, which was about wide enough for a trailer truck to go down. And I couldn't quite understand that. So Mr. Harrison Tanner may have owned a good amount of land from where he lived up until about. So if he owned that strip of land, because Harrison Tanner, Martin, Plinkett, and Gray, and then there was a strip of land that went down to the school. And it was still there until a few years ago, because I was really shocked that it was still around. Why would you buy that? Why would somebody buy land and not buy that little right of way? You know?
Yeah.
You know, you couldn't do nothing with the right of way.
Right.
You know.
Now, was Harris Tenner?
Harrison.
He was part of the Tenners here in Falls Church.
Yes, he was. Yeah.
How was he related? Do you know? Was Joseph Tenner his brother?
Joseph, that may have been his nephew.
Nephew, okay.
Then there was a real estate man named Ollie Tenner. His daughter is still living, and her name is Mildred, if I'm not mistaken, and she might be, I don't know if she's in Warrenton or whether she's in D.C., but she would be way up in age. And they lived in Falls Church. You know, Falls Church had a black section off of Broad Street. And that was an interesting article. There were no blacks. Somebody wrote it up. It was in this Falls Church paper. Said there weren't no blacks in Falls Church. But I said I was going to write them and tell them that was not true. Reverend Carstens lived in the city of Falls Church. Let's see, what's another family lived there? The Tenners lived in the city of Falls Church. And
I think the Hendersons did too.
The Hendersons, yeah, the Henderson. And there was this girl I went to school with named Donna. I can't even think of her name. But anyway, there were blacks in the city of Falls Church, but a lot of people didn't know that. There was a house fire in the city of Falls Church, and I remember by like 55, I guess. This lady went back into the house to get $11, her pocketbook with $11, and she died in the fire, you know. I don't know her name, but I remember that. I'll always remember that.
And she was African American?
Yeah, she was.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about the legacy of your grandparents,
Okay.
Because your grandfather bought property in that Merrifield area and started Williamstown, which is no longer there.
Right.
So give us the names of your grandparents and talk about them coming to Fairfax and their legacy.
Okay. There were